Ladies and gentlemen, I call this hearing of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee to order. I'm pleased to welcome everyone here today for the very important hearing on the fiscal year 2016 budget request for cyber operations programs of the Department of Defense. One need only read the headlines of almost any newspaper or almost any day by way of the media to see the challenges we face as a nation when it comes to hacking and cyber threats. The array of threats both from state and non-state actors pose significant challenges to our military forces, our economic well-being, and our diplomatic activities worldwide. The recent government accountability report on the vulnerabilities to our air traffic control networks vividly illustrate the need to work across departments, agencies, and even internationally to ensure our security. We recognize that the Department of Defense capabilities will be critical to those efforts, but must be provided the resources and authorities to be effective. As we look at this budget request and as the witnesses describe their plans for how they will execute their activities in fiscal year 2016, I ask that you address the following questions. What specifically are you requesting in the budget, and what major initiatives do you expect to fund? If defense sequestration caps are enforced in the budget request, what impacts do you expect this year? How are you measuring or assessing the cybersecurity posture of the Department of Defense networks, and what vulnerabilities do you see? Today, we've invited a panel that represents the top military leadership for cyber operations across the Department of Defense. Our witnesses include Admiral Michael Rogers, Commander of the U.S. Cyber Command, Lieutenant General Edward C. Cardon, Commander, U.S. Army Cyber Command, Vice Admiral Jan Tighe, Commander, Navy Fleet Cyber Command, 10th Fleet, Major General Daniel J. O'Donohue, Commanding General, Marine Forces Cyber, and Major General Berkey Wilson, Commander, 24th Air Force. Now I'd like to invite the subcommittee ranking member, Mr. Langevin of Rhode Island, to make any comments that he might have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. And as always, I thank you all for the work you're doing on behalf of our country. Thank you all for your service. The 2014 Quadrennial Defense Review stated that, and I quote, "The importance of cyberspace to the American way of life and to the nation's security makes cyberspace an attractive target for those seeking to challenge our security and economic order," end quote. I could not agree more. Last year, the Director of National Intelligence placed cyber threats #1 on the list of strategic threats to the United States. Most recently, the National Security Strategy cites the danger of disruption and even destructive cyber attack is growing. The cyber domain is complex. We all understand that. Threats in this space continuously evolve based on emerging technologies and techniques to counter our efforts. Threats are carried out by a diverse set of actors. Securing, defending, and operating freely in this space presents a non-traditional challenge requiring an immediate but thoughtful response. Since the creation of U.S. Cyber Command, the Department has made substantial strides in understanding and enabling freedom of action in the cyber domain, as well as understanding and protecting Department of Defense networks. Significant investments have been made. In fact, cyberspace is the only area of growth in the Department of Defense's budget the last few years. I commend the Department's efforts, and I'm proud of what has been achieved so far. Yet there is still much to be done. Confronting this challenge will continue to require dialogue between the Department and Congress on the policies, capabilities, and other resources needed to appropriately and successfully operate in the cyber domain. That's why this hearing is so important. Together, we can build and maintain a ready cyber force for the nation. I look forward to receiving an update from the witnesses on the build-out of our cyber capacity and the fiscal year 2016 budget request. I hope the services will provide us an understanding of total force requirements for cyber operations, both service-specific and the U.S. Cyber Command, and for the U.S. Cyber Command, to enable the subcommittee to better understand all resources needed and provide for a ready force. Specifically, I'm eager to hear about how the services are recruiting and retaining qualified military and civilian personnel, managing cyber as a career field, and any challenges associated with those fields. I look forward to hearing how the services are incorporating the reserve components into the cyber mission forces. Additionally, I'd like to understand how science and technology investments are being leveraged now and in the future to deliver the latest and best capabilities. I'd also like the witnesses' perspective on whether the current acquisition process delivers tools in time to meet and stay ahead of the threat, which, as we know, as technology changes so quickly, that's a significant challenge on our hands. So there's much to discuss on this issue, and in order to allow for dialogue, I'm going to end my remarks here. And again, I want to thank our witnesses for appearing before the subcommittee, and to you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Langevin. Before we begin, I'd like to remind our witnesses that your written statements will be submitted for the record, so we ask that you summarize your comments to 5 minutes or less. Admiral Rogers, we begin with you.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Langevin, and distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to appear before you today to discuss our military cybersecurity posture, and I'd like to thank you for convening this forum. I'm equally pleased to be sitting alongside my colleagues from each of the 4 service components of the United States Cyber Command. It gives me great pride to appear before you today to highlight and commend the accomplishments of the uniformed and civilian personnel of U.S. Cyber Command and its components. And I am both grateful for and humbled by the opportunity that I have been given to lead this cyber team. The current threat environment is, as you have just described in your opening remarks, uncertain. That said, we are certain of one particular thing, and that's the pervasive nature of these cyber threats and the sophistication of the adversaries we face. Our military networks are probed for vulnerabilities literally thousands of times a day. The very assets within our military that provide us formidable advantages over adversaries are precisely the reason that our enemies seek to map, understand, exploit, and disrupt our global network architecture. The cyber intruders of today not only want to disrupt our actions, but they seek to establish a permanent presence on our networks. Quite simply, threats and vulnerabilities are changing and expanding at an accelerating and significant pace. Compounding this threat is the fact that we are dependent on cyberspace. Operating freely and securely in cyberspace is critical to not only our military and our government, but also to the private sector, which is responsible for maintaining much of our nation's critical infrastructure, to including that of key parts of the Department of Defense. The bottom line is weakness in cyberspace has the potential to hold back our success in every field where our nature is engaged. And I'd like to focus in our comments today on the progress we've made so far, the achievements that we're doing in the operational arena, and what I think is the way ahead. And I look forward to that discussion. With that, I will conclude my opening remarks.
Thank you very much. And General Cardon.
Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Langevin, members of the committee, it's an honor to be here on behalf of U.S. Army Cyber Command and 2nd Army alongside Admiral Rogers and my fellow commanders. We appreciate the work of this committee to protect the American people from emerging threats and ensure our military has the capabilities we need to defend the nation. Over the last few years, we've had tremendous momentum both within the institution and in operationalizing cyberspace, but a lot of work remains. For the institution, we've consolidated cyberspace under one commander. We've created the Cyber Center of Excellence in Fort Gordon, Georgia, and the Army Cyber Institute at the United States Military Academy. The Army is currently establishing the necessary frameworks to build capabilities for the Army and, by extension, the Joint Force. Operationally, we're making progress with mission-focused approaches supporting Army and combatant commanders. We made progress this year developing the Army's portion of the Cyber Mission Force, with 25 of 41 teams on mission now, and we expect to have all 41 on mission by the end of fiscal year 16 as planned. In the face of determined adversaries, though, we're employing these teams as they reach initial operating capability, and we'll continue to bring forces and capabilities online through 17. The threat, vulnerabilities, and mission set demand this sense of urgency. This also includes bringing online 21 U.S. Army Reserve and Army National Guard protection teams that will be trained at the same standards as the active component cyber force. We are going to need more personnel beyond the Cyber Mission Force to build out the support required to fully employ the Cyber Mission Force and to build capabilities for Army formations. To better manage our people, the Army created a cyber branch, and we're exploring the creation of a cyber career field for civilian personnel. For training, we have a centrally funded joint model for individually training. but we're working to also build collective training capabilities and their associated facilities within a joint construct. For equipping the forces, we're developing and refining the necessary framework to give us the agility that we'll need in programming, resourcing, and acquisition for infrastructure, platforms, and tools. And for a more defensible architecture and network, we're partnering with the Army's Chief Information Officer, Defense Information Systems Agency, and the Air Force for an extensive network modernization efforts. These are essential for the security, operation, and defense of our Department of Defense networks. We have made tremendous progress, and with your support, we have the necessary program resources to continue our momentum, but we cannot delay for the struggles on us now. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, General. And Admiral Tighe.
Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Langevin, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for your support to our military and the opportunity to appear before you today. Since my Fleet Cyber Command predecessor, Admiral Mike Rogers, last testified before this subcommittee in July of 2012, the Department of Defense, U.S. Cyber Command, and the service components have significantly matured our operations and cyber operational capabilities. I appreciate the opportunity to outline Navy's specific progress over the past 2 years, where we are headed to address an ever-increasing threat, and how budgetary uncertainty is likely to impact our progress and operations. Fleet Cyber Command directs the operations to secure, operate, and defend Navy networks within the Department of Defense Information Network. We operate Navy networks as a warfighting platform, which must be aggressively defended and from intrusion, exploitation, and attack. The Navy network consists of more than 500,000 end-user devices, approximately 75,000 network devices, and nearly 45,000 applications and systems across 3 security enclaves. We've transformed the way we operate and defend over the past 2 years based on operational lessons learned. Specifically, beginning in summer of 2013, we, with Admiral Rogers at the helm at the time, fought through an adversary intrusion into Navy's unclassified network. Under the named operation known as Operation Rolling Tide, Fleet Cyber Command drove out the intruder through exceptional collaboration with affected Navy commanders, U.S. Cyber Command, the National Security Agency, the Defense Information Security Agency, and our fellow cyber service components. Although any intrusion upon our network is troubling, this operation served as a learning opportunity that has both matured the way we operate and defend our networks, and simultaneously highlighted gaps both in cybersecurity posture and in our defensive operational capabilities. As a result of this operation and other cybersecurity initiatives inside of the Navy, we have already made, proposed, or planned for a nearly $1 billion investment between the years of FY14 and FY20 that will greatly reduce the risk of successful cyberspace operations against Navy networks. Of course, these investments are built on the premise that our future budgets will not be drastically reduced by sequestration. Specifically, if budget uncertainty continues, we will have an increasingly difficult time addressing this very real and present danger to our national security and maritime warfighting capabilities. Operationally, and on a 24/7 and 365 days a year, Fleet Cyber Command is focused on configuring and operating layered defense in-depth capabilities to prevent malicious actors from gaining access to our Navy networks in collaboration and cooperation with our sister services, U.S. Cyber Command, Joint Forces Headquarters, DODIN, DISA, and the National Security Agency. Additionally, we're driving towards expanded cyber situational awareness to inform our network maneuvers and reduce risk in this space. As you know, Navy and other service components are building the maneuver elements in the cyber mission force for U.S. Cyber Command by manning, training, and certifying teams to the U.S. Cyber Command standards. The Navy is currently on track to have personnel assigned for all 40 teams, all 40 of the Navy-sourced cyber mission force teams in 2016, with full operational capability in the following year. Additionally, between now and 2018, an additional 298 cyber reserve billets will also augment the cyber force manning plan. In delivering on both U.S. Cyber Command's and the U.S. Navy's requirements in cyberspace, I am fortunate to have these component commanders as partners, in addition to the many organizations who are not represented here, but are every bit a member of Team Cyber. Thank you again, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral, very much. And General Donahue.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Langevin, and distinguished members of this subcommittee, it is an honor to appear before you today. On behalf of your Marines, civilian Marines and their families, I thank you for your continued support as we pursue a multi-year joint cyberspace strategy. Marines have a legacy of operating in any clime or place, whether at sea with the Navy or working shoulder to shoulder with our joint interagency and coalition partners, or standing ready to respond to crises around the globe. Marines employ combined arms across the air, land, and sea domains. We are now entering an era of transition where the cyber domain will be fully integrated in the same way. Our Commandant has laid out a clear vision to increase the capacity and capability of the Marine Air Ground Task Force to fully integrate cyberspace operations. Marfor Cyber is leading the effort to ensure that we institutionalize this vision across the Marine Corps, to include by participating in over 30 exercises last year. As a service component to U.S. Cyber Command, Marfor Cyber, in conjunction with its service partners, conducts full-spectrum cyberspace operations to enable freedom of action across the cyberspace domain and deny the same to our adversaries. Additionally, Marfor Cyber provides direct support to United States Special Operations Command's missions worldwide. To support these operations, we are building the Cyber Mission Force, and these forces are achieving operational outcomes today. These achievements are helping us to shape the vision for the future of cyberspace operations for the Marine Corps as part of the Joint Interagency and Combined Force. Last June, U.S. Cyber Command certified our first cyber mission team and our first national cyber protection team. During this time, our second cyber mission team reached its initial operation capability. Marfor Cyber is on track to have over 75% of its teams resourced by the end of 2015. To expedite this force build, the Marine Corps has dedicated 16% of its retention bonuses for our cyberspace professionals. And based on lessons learned, we have streamlined our personnel and training pipeline as we deal with the surge requirements of a startup force. In addition, we've expanded the opportunities and developed procedures for our teams to work with increasing effectiveness across the joint and interagency force. This has been a combat multiplier. At the bottom line, we are fielding the cyber forces required by our strategy and provided for by the President's budget, ready, on time, and with the increasing operability in ways that we had not imagined. As we build the force, Marfor Cyber is achieving operational outcomes in stride by supporting joint interagency and coalition partners at home and overseas. Every day, we are planning cyberspace operations, defending the network, and standing ready, when directed by U.S. Cyber Command, to conduct offensive cyberspace operations. Increasingly, combatant commanders and special operation forces now see cyberspace operations not as a special staff function, but essential to everything that warfighters do. Currently, we are pursuing a considered joint and service strategy for the multi-year development of a unified network that will facilitate command and control, provide real-time situational awareness, and assist with decision support to commanders at all levels. For the Marine Corps, this network will be optimized for operational support to forces as they are deployed across the globe and as they train for crisis response. In an unstable and unpredictable security environment, the Marines provide a ready, forward, expeditionary extension of cyber capability for the Joint Interagency and Combined Force. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and thank you for your continued support to our national treasure, our Marine civilians and their families. I look forward to answering your questions.
General, thank you very much. And General Wilson.
Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Langevin, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today with my fellow commanders. It's an honor to represent the outstanding men and women of Air Force's Cyber and 24th Air Force. I'm extremely proud of the work our airmen, officers, enlisted and civilians do each and every day to field and employ cyber capabilities in support of combatant and Air Force commanders. In the interest of time, let me share just a few examples to highlight how our airmen are making positive, lasting impacts to our nation. Since we last briefed the subcommittee, the Air Force completed migration of our unclassified networks from many disparate systems into a single architecture. We transitioned over 644,000 users across more than 250 geographic locations to a single network and reduced over 100 internet access points into a more streamlined 16 gateways. The end result has been more reliable, affordable, and most importantly, defensible network. The Air Force has also championed the fielding of next-generation technology by partnering with the Army and Defense Information Systems Agency to support the transition to a joint information environment. Together, we are implementing joint regional security stacks and making enhancements to our networks in order to achieve a single DoD security architecture. The combined team achieved a critical milestone last September when they fielded the first security stack, and we've continued to push hard on these efforts, which will benefit the entire department by reducing our network attack surface and increasing network capacity and capability. Like the other services, we've made significant progress towards fielding and employing our initial cyber mission forces. Today, Air Force's cyber has 15 teams that achieve initial operating capability, and 2 teams have reached full operating capability. In addition to providing unprecedented support to joint and coalition combat forces in Afghanistan and Syria, these cyber forces are wholly engaged in support of combatant and Air Force commanders around the world, as well as the defense of the nation. I'm proud to report our Air Reserve component is a full partner in the Cyber Mission Force build, in addition to our other daily, day-to-day cyber operations. We're leveraging traditional reservists, Air Reserve technicians, and Air National Guardsmen across the command to meet our warfighting commitments. Whether it's commanding and controlling cyber forces from one of our operations centers, deploying as part of our combat communications team, installing cyber infrastructure around the world, or any other task, each of our total force members meet the same demanding standards and serve alongside our active duty counterparts. In my humble opinion, it's a tremendous example of total force integration in action. The Air Force has also instituted several key initiatives to better recruit, develop, and retain our cyber forces. Most recently, we approved a Stripes for Certifications program, which provides the opportunity for candidates to enlist at a higher grade when entering the Air Force with desired cyber-related certifications. We've also continued our selective reenlistment bonus program to provide additional incentives for enlisted members to continue to serve in the demanding cyber and intelligence specialties. For our officers, we have complemented the Cyber Warfare Operations Career Track, which we established several years ago with a new Cyber Intermediate Leadership Program. The objective is to identify qualified cyber and intelligence officers and provide them the right professional growth opportunities. We held our first board just recently and competitively selected 83 majors and senior captains from across the cyber fields to serve in key command and operational positions, many as integral members of the Cyber Mission Force. And finally, we continue to support a host of initiatives aimed at improving the outreach to our nation's youngest generation. I'd like to highlight just one that will be culminating here in D.C. On March 12th. It's called Cyber Patriot, and sponsored by the Air Force Association in partnership with local high schools and middle schools around the country, several industry partners, as well as cyber professionals from the Air Force. Cyber Patriot's goal is to inspire students to pursue careers in cybersecurity or other STEM career fields. At the beginning of the school year in September, over 2,100 teams, 2,100 teams involving nearly 10,000 students in the U.S., Canada, United Kingdom, and our DoD schools overseas participated in cyber training and competitions. We've seen a 40% increase in participation this year. As I mentioned, Cyber Patriot will culminate here locally at the National Harbor with 28 teams competing in the national finals. Students will earn national recognition and scholarships. Without a doubt, the program is an exemplar of how public-private partnership can make a real difference. Personally, it's been rewarding to see our airmen giving back to our younger generation. These are just a handful of examples to share how our airmen are pushing hard to increase cyber capability and capacity across the command. Believe me, Air Force's Cyber and 24th Air Force are all in and fully committed to the mission. Our cyber force is more capable than ever before and continues to get better every day. None of this would be possible without your continued support. As you've heard from my counterparts, the need for this support will only increase in importance as we move forward. It's clear resource stability in the years ahead will best enable our continued success in developing airmen and maturing our capabilities to operate in, through, and from the cyberspace domain. Simply put, our cyber warriors truly are professionals in every sense of the word, and they deserve our full support. Along with my fellow commanders, it's an honor to be here today. Thank you again for the opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General. And that was fascinating to find out about the involvement of students. And what a great opportunity. And I know it has to be reassuring to the American people. Your service, your personnel, the families that are supportive of your personnel, and just thank each of you for protecting American families and advancing our national security. We'll now go into a round of 5 minutes of each member. Kevin Gates, who's our professional staff person, will keep the time. Members of Congress need timekeepers more than other people, and so beginning with me. And so as we begin, Admiral Rogers, given the increasing and evolving cyber threats, what are the critical steps that Congress can do to help enable Cybercom accomplish your mission?
My first comment would be ensure a steady resource stream here. If you look at sequestration, the implications of the Budget Control Act for us, if you executed that, would have significant impact on our ability to execute the operational vision, and would have impact on our ability to defend our own department's networks. The expectation from the rest of the nation that the Department of Defense is going to be there to provide capability to defend critical U.S. infrastructure. It'll slow and in some cases stop our ability to generate teams. It will lead us into contractual default issues. For example, we're in a MILCON project right now that you have funded to actually create physical infrastructure for U.S. Cyber Command. Because we're new, we've only funded 2 out of the 3 years of that. So if we have another issue with that, we'll have contractual issues. Bottom line, though, our ability to defend the nation and our department from a cyber perspective in the world that we're facing, with the threats we're facing, is significantly impacted if we can't sustain the resource budget picture that we have developed.
And I share your concern to the point it would be very helpful to me, Admiral, if you could provide a written response to that question, which specifically would address specific delays and levels of confusion. Our colleagues need to know this because it's not as appreciated, I think, as it should be. So that would be very helpful. Admiral Tighe, in your testimony, you mentioned designing resiliency in programs through common standards and protocols. Could you give us an example of what you mean by that? For the others, how do you think that we will be able to measure the resiliency of your programs?
Yes, Chairman. Our approach to building in resiliency runs the gamut from technological innovation in our networks to the notion of fighting through cyber attacks when we are under attack. The people, the processes that we have, the method by which we fight through a cyber attack is really a very large part of our warfighting approach to how we defend our networks. And so when we talk about the technological side, that is about getting the capabilities from the boundary of the internet all the way down to our individual host systems in a way that we can monitor and understand our own networks and monitor and understand any threats that may be traversing through our networks. And so having that built in, which many of those new capabilities are coming in as a result of Operation Rolling Tide, we have learned where we had gaps and are instituting some of those defense in-depth capabilities and standardizing interfaces across systems and networks that talk to each other. Beyond our corporate networks that I'm responsible for operating and defending, as you know, we have many applications, weapons systems, and other types of systems in the Navy that are necessary to accomplish our mission that hang off of our networks. And so making sure we understand how we're interfacing with those networks, how we're extending our protections to them, is a big part of our program and budget submit in building those capabilities in and codifying across all of the acquisition commands who build systems for the Navy, building on technology, building on operating systems, all coming potentially with cyber vulnerabilities if we haven't built it into the front end of that acquisition process. So in summary, I think the resiliency that we're looking for includes both the technological advances that we've got planned into our system and how we organize and defend with the personnel and the analytic capability to understand what's going on in our network so we can respond quickly.
Well, we certainly appreciate your professionalism, and this is going to be a really quick question, General Cardon. What is the status of establishing the Cyber Command in the district, in the community next door to me at Fort Gordon, Georgia.
So we have a $90 million appropriation should break ground here October, November this year. So we're really excited about that. That will be the focal point for cyber for the Army.
Central Savannah area is really looking forward to your presence. I now proceed to Congressman Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thanks to all of our witnesses. Admiral Rogers, I'd like to start with you, if I could, on your perspective on an issue that's become more and more acute in recent years. I don't think anyone would argue that we as a nation have developed and continue to develop some exquisite capabilities in cyberspace. I think it's without question. However, I'm concerned that we're developing capabilities faster than we develop the doctrine and policy that guides their use. We all would agree that cyber operations obviously are critical to how we operate now and in the future. But there appears to be a real need for greater definition of legal structures for cyber activities and operations in defense of the nation. And there appears to be even more of a gray area around support to civil authorities when it's not under a Title 10 construct, whether it be Title 32, 50, 18, or 5, drill status, how we utilize our reserve components, and many of the ways that our servicemen and women can interface outside the DoD. So my question for you, can you speak to your command's efforts to work through these policy challenges?
So I think you raised some significant issues. Clearly, they are much broader than just U.S. Cyber Command, although we're an important part of this dialogue, we're an important part of this process. If I could, I'll start with the second half first and then work my way back. In terms of how we make sure that we are maximizing the capabilities that we are building across the total force, from the reserve, the guard, and the active component, particularly as you've indicated, when we're applying it outside the Title 10 framework, the argument, my part of the discussion is, look, we have a very confident, mature structure in the form of defense support to civil authorities that we currently use already in many other mission areas in the department. I think that's a good starting point for us when we look at how we're going to apply capability in Title 18, Title 5, Title 52. So I think there's a good framework for us to build around, and that's kind of the starting position, if you will, that we're taking as a department, broadly speaking. The first part of the question that you raised about how do we make sure that even as we are generating capability, we're also thinking about the doctrine and the legal authority, if you will, that helps frame how we apply it in a way that maximizes outcomes and that does it within a framework that we're all comfortable with. I think on the doctrinal side, I'm pretty comfortable that we've got a broad vision. If you look, we've got the publications, we've got a broad dialogue about how we're going to do it. I think the biggest challenge in some ways that we're still trying to wrestle our way through here is if we're going to generate or apply these capabilities outside the DoD framework, let's say in defending critical U.S. infrastructure. That is an area that we still have to work through the details. Okay, so what is the legal and policy framework that we're going to use? I'm comfortable that in a crisis we'll work our way through it, but the point I'm trying to make is we don't want to wait till a crisis to do this. You want to have this all laid out. You want the private sector to understand it. You want the rest of our governmental partners, because we're going to do this teaming with others in the government, DHS, FBI, other partners, and we want to make sure that we have laid that all out in advance. So there's a variety of steps we're taking through between exercises, between ongoing policy deliberations, and through the legal frameworks we're trying to create, for example, what the Congress is looking at for cyber information sharing legislation. That's all a part of the efforts we're trying to move forward to address the important issue that you've highlighted.
Well, thank you. I hope we can continue to work through those things, and that's something that I would pay particular close attention to. So thank you for where we are right now, and look forward to continuing this dialogue. Cybersecurity obviously is an incredibly important field, but it also has lots of synergies with other areas of DoD activities, SIGINT, electronic warfare, information operations, and many more. General, if I could ask you, I know the Army has recognized this in particular with their doctrinal recognition of the merging of cyber and EW, and certainly the Navy's information dominance community is in this as well. as our Navy witnesses know quite personally. So my question is, are the interactions between cyber and these communities clear or ad hoc, and how do training, manning, and equipping get balanced across these synergistic investments? Are we building cyber in concert with or on the shoulders of these other communities?
In this case, we have doctrine in the, we call it CMAs, cyber electromagnetic capabilities, and we built these organizations into our Army Service Component Commands, Corps, divisions, and brigades. Now, the capabilities to deliver all that don't fully exist yet, but because we have recognized this convergence. But for example, we already have experiences using this in some of the war zones, former war zones, such as Iraq, where you had crew devices to protect against IEDs, tactical SIGINT forces, and it's really how do you organize these in time and space to accomplish a specific mission. So we're trying to harness what we learned in Iraq and Afghanistan and what we're learning today and bring that forward. I think this is a journey, and we still have a lot of work to do on what are the additional capabilities we need at those levels.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Langevin. We now proceed to Navy SEAL veteran Congressman Ryan Zinke of Montana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, from the perspective of a ground pounder, you know, I was just a frogman. It seems to me when you say your ability to defend the nation, I'm concerned about the chain of command. You know, we've had earlier discussions about, you know, what is the difference, whether a missile attack is incoming or whether it hits a military facility or a piece of our major infrastructure or our banking system. It's an attack. And I'm concerned that the chain of command doesn't allow you to quickly react to an attack, because somehow we have to go through and determine whether it's a bank or whether there is a, you know, what article it's under. And it seems to me that we need to take a fast look at this. And so we're not responding to a crisis, but preparing for what I think most in this room believe is an eventual attack. So I guess my question is, are you comfortable with the your current ability to defend this nation in the shipyards and infrastructure and everything there is, the cyber? And if you're not, what are the benefits of looking at streamlining our chain of command, and so we can have accountability, we can have you know, cost and efficiency? You know, what do you see as the path forward?
So if I could, Congressman, let me take a look at, give you an initial thought. The positive side in my mind is we have clearly delineated who has what responsibilities. And I say that if I go back 2-3 years ago, we literally spent years debating about who was going to have what role. And it literally probably took us 2 years to generate an internal consensus as to who was going to do what. The positive side for me, I've now been in command coming up in approximately a year. The positive side for me is, hey, we've moved beyond a discussion of who ought to do what to, okay, now we have clearly identified who has what responsibilities. Now let's roll up our sleeves and focus on how we're going to make this work. Clearly, we're not where we want to be yet. The point I try to make to my DHS, because the vision as currently constructed is DOD will apply its capabilities in a supporting role, if you will, with DHS largely being the supported entity within the federal government as having the primary responsibility for cybersecurity outside the .gov domain, if you will, in the broader civilian infrastructure. The point I'm trying to make, I'm making with my teammates at DHS and the FBI, for example, are my military culture teaches me you got to train, you got to exercise, you got to get down to the execution level of detail, and you got to do that all before the crisis. You know, just as you have learned in your own life, discovery learning while moving to contact is an incredibly bad way to go about generating insights and getting more proficient at the mission. What I would suggest is we need to make this current, we need to wring this current system out. And before we go back again and spend more time on this, one of the inputs I have provided is hold us accountable for executing what we have created. And if in that experience, we come to the conclusion that, hey, we made some assumptions that turned out to be flawed, then we ought to step back and relook at it. But for me, at least, I'm not there yet.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Chairman, I yield the remaining part of my time. I look forward to working with you on this and supporting you where I can.
Thank you, Congressman Zinke. We now proceed to Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank each of you for offering your testimony today. Welcome to Washington. I know you all are here frequently. A special welcome to Major General Wilson, who's in from San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base. We're very proud of the work that you all are doing there. Let me ask you all a question about training people in cybersecurity in our country, because this issue and the need for that skill is only going to become more pronounced in the coming years. This Congress is in the process of taking up our big education reauthorization bill, for example, ESEA. What programs in our schools should we be expanding or growing, not only in our high schools but also in our colleges, to prepare more students to take on roles in cybersecurity, and so that you all have a pipeline of qualified people who can take on these jobs, a job that is becoming more in demand, not just in the military or in government, but also in the private sector. And I'll open it up for any of you.
Ed, why don't you take a first cut, because you've done some interesting work at the high school level.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. When you look at the young generation, that's really, you've got to get, it's a STEM problem we've seen for years, no matter what the mission that we need in the DoD. And so when you take a look at it, you've got to get young folks excited about cybersecurity in this case. And what we find is they yearn for interaction with people that are really doing the job. And it's fascinating to watch them in front of young airmen, and it would be the same with a soldier, sailor, Marine, wouldn't make any difference. To be able to share, to put an 18, 19, 20-year-old in front of them, because it's not hard for them to project themselves in the roles that they do, that we do every day. And so what we found probably the most successful is this Cyber Patriot, and there's others like it. We have a Troop for Teens program there in San Antonio that you're familiar with, sir. When we're able to interact with the schools at the grassroots level, seems to be the most effective. I would argue that the Cyber Patriot is very effective because we bring private industry in to enable from a funding perspective, so they are able to partner in the public-private partnership. We find that to be very, very powerful. And so in our case, I'm proud to be wearing an Air Force uniform, and that the Air Force Association sponsors the Cyber Patriot program. We think we got a good thing going there. And so but the feedback from the local schools, teachers, mentors that we bring in to work with the kids, they just need more mentors. They need more attention. And so while we can put more curriculum in place, that's a wonderful thing, to get kids excited. And I'll give you just a couple of statistics in some of the studies we've looked at in terms of kids that are coming out of the Cyber Patriot program. The national average is typically 9 to 15%, depending, that are kids that are interested in cybersecurity or other STEM fields, just across the student population. We're seeing about those numbers when kids come in, but we're seeing graduates out of Cyber Patriot at the 80–85% rate that are interested in cybersecurity or STEM degrees when they go off to college. You could argue maybe that's because of the people that are joining the program. But I would argue that when you look at the caliber and the content of what they know when they walk in the door, they don't know a lot about cybersecurity. When they walk out the door, they know a lot about it. And so it's getting them motivated. I think they can see themselves in those career fields. And so that exposure, the biggest reason we saw a 40% increase this year is we got into the middle schools. We incorporated the middle schools into the Cyber Patriot program. Next year, we're going to take a stab at the upper tiers of the elementary school and get them excited about doing cybersecurity. I would argue that all of the services have similar programs, and sometimes it's about flying or space out, in the Air Force. Cyber is one of those, and it's an exciting career field, and people see themselves in it. And so I think that's the key, is to get our young folks excited about what the potential is for them.
Sure.
Congressman, if I may, I think the point on the STEM is really, really important, and as early as we can get the STEM, get our young kids motivated in STEM, the better. We need them to be comfortable with technology and be comfortable as analysts, if you will. We have to connect the dots a lot of times. We need our workforce to be able to connect dots, not just understand technology, but understand what's really happening when you don't have the full picture. And so the STEM programs tend to do that for our young people. I think at the same time, so puzzles and things like of that nature. But I think at the same time, there are also programs that we've been able to leverage, sponsored by National Science Foundation and others. Scholarships for Service is a program that gets graduate level education and college education and contributes to that education with a stipend, for example. But then they come into the federal service in cyberspace. And so some of those kinds of programs are also I think very valuable in exposing, our young people and our college-age students to cybersecurity challenges, but also sort of bringing them into the government as a first job.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Yield
you.
back to you.
Thank you, Congressman Castro. We now proceed to Congressman Doug Lamborn of Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to build on this theme of education. Admiral Rogers, the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs in my district, and the Army Reserve just announced a partnership to educate cyber warriors. Is this a good model, and should we support it?
Well, let me be honest, Congressman, I don't know the details of the model, so I'm not in a good position to tell you is it good or bad. Having said that, one of my takeaways in this area is clearly this is all about partnerships. And those partnerships have to include the private sector, but not just the corporate or network owners, if you will. The educational piece, the academic piece, the ability to generate insights, to go to the doctrine and the policy kinds of issues we had talked before. I try to remind people, look, this has got to be a broader discussion. Look at, for example, some of the initial work we did in the nuclear world when we were first trying to develop deterrence theory that we take for granted now. The academic world played a huge role in that. If you go back 50, 60 years, I'd like to see us do the same thing. And the other thing that concerns me about the academic world is, and one reason why I, as a commander, I spent a fair amount of time at academic institutions from the collegiate level down to I was just at a charter school in Harlem yesterday, as a matter of fact, when I was, as a follow-on to some work I was doing in New York City. You are as I remind them, you're educating our workforce. I have a vested interest in partnering with you to help us do that, because the technology we use is important. And clearly we can't execute our mission without it. But where we really gain our advantage, our true strength, is in the men and women who apply that technology.
Okay, thank you. And obviously this is something I think we're all really excited about pursuing. General Wilson, recently I visited the 561st Network Operations Squadron, which is in my district at Air Force Base Peterson. And they told me that their structure and approach to network cybersecurity could be a model for the other service branches. Is that something you would agree with, and if so, why?
So, sir, I think you were with Lieutenant Colonel Rocky Rockwell and the team
That's
at
right.
the 561st.
That's right.
Thank you for visiting. They really enjoyed the visit. Sir, what they were referring to was this migration that I hinted at, getting the Air Force network, which is part of our larger DoD information network, to one centrally managed with a single architecture, which is really an early interim step towards the joint information environment. So we're huge believers in it. Many of the lessons that we learned out of the migration actually have been incorporated with the Army and with DISA and with all the services as we look at the JIE, this Joint Information Environment Architecture, and the way that we're transitioning all of our networks. And so it is a model. I think there's a lot of good, hard lessons. The team that you met at the 561st, we have a sister unit at the 26th down in Montgomery, Alabama at Gunter Air Force Base, is actually formed. About 40 people are on the joint management team that are working the transition with JIE. So we've taken the lessons for the people that have the bruises from going through a transition of that magnitude and trying to apply that to the JIE so that we're successful. So absolutely believe that it's directly applicable, and we're excited about moving forward.
Well, I know that there can be value with each service branch learning its own lessons and standing something up. But on the other hand, there's also, on the other side of the balance, why reinvent the wheel? If one of the branches is really done forward work, maybe that should be a model for others to follow.
So JIE, which we've all bought into in terms of the services, is really the next generation beyond where we're at today in the Air Force. And so it's really the interim step. And so we shouldn't be satisfied with where the Air Force is. We need even a more defensible network. It's the best we can do with, decades-old, 5-year-old technology. We need to move the DoD forward with the newer technologies, the next generation technologies, cloud architectures, single security stack, sewer gateway, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, and thank you all for your service.
Thank you very much, Congressman Lambert. We now proceed with Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses here today for your service and the time you took to prepare for today's hearing. My question is for Lieutenant General Cardon. Last month at a conference, you discussed the military's need for flexibility. It's something we hear quite often, and that the traditional top-down way of operating is a challenge in its organizational approach, especially as it relates to cybersecurity. Can you explain this further? And then I'm also interested in how this is applicable to the current mission in Afghanistan.
So I come at it from an operational approach, and so the challenge in operations is what level of centralization do you need and what level of decentralization do you need? And so some operations require a high degree of centralization and some operations work best decentralized. The art is figuring out which one's most applicable. And in cyber, I think we have a centralized framework with a decentralized execution. But I'll go further, building on what Admiral Rogers talked about. It's when you start to bring coalition and private, because this affects all of us. So anything that happens to any one of us, all of us are talking to each other here. And with Cybercom, it's going wider because everyone could have the same problem. So you create more like a fusion cell. I describe it as being mission-focused, not organizationally focused. So everyone looks at the mission, everyone's working on the problem. So when you take an example, something like Heartbleed, which was a severe vulnerability that affected everyone, not just in the military, but in private industry, that's a fusion sort of approach. Looks different inside the military, but for everyone was working on this problem across the country. In Afghanistan, operations are very decentralized. There's a limited amount of capability. It's prioritized by General Campbell, and then we use it accordingly. And so the decentralized nature of the operations there, often driven by the terrain, has, I think, been pretty effective.
Thank you very much. My second question relates to sequestration and funding at Budget Control Act levels. Can you talk about what the risks are to the Army Network's campaign plans, network modernization efforts, should the DoD and the Army have to execute funding at BCA levels?
So General Wilson just talked about the Air Force collapsing their networks, and the Army has not yet done that, and that's why we're partnered with the Air Force to do that. So the Army would take about a $6 billion reduction off the top. That's going to affect training, it's going to affect our network modernization, it's going to affect our installation support, and it's going to affect the procurement of weapon systems. But more importantly, it's the upgrades, software upgrades that we need to do to those weapon systems to reduce cyber vulnerabilities. If the cuts stay, the Army's also going to have to cut force structure. That's estimated to be 30,000. And while cyber is still ranked very high in the Department of the Army, I think it's fair to say that cyber will be part of that discussion. So we have a lot of, this is very concerning. It's still very, very highly ranked in the department. So it's a very high priority. But the nature of those two things together makes a very difficult problem for us.
Can I make one other comment on the sequestration piece? The other thing that concerns me is the longer-term implication. I watched the way at U.S. Cyber Command, particularly our civilian workforce, reacted to the government shutdown in the beginning of fiscal year 14. And as we said to them, trust us. We want you to stay with us. This is a burp. And now I watch us repeat this kind of scenario where this time it's just significant funding cuts. One of my concerns is, does our workforce start to believe, you know, I'm not so sure that there's this long-term commitment. And given the skills that I have and the fact that I could make more money going elsewhere on the outside, the other concern I have, quite frankly, is that we're going to start to see elements of our workforce, civilian and potential military, start to walk away. And as I said, the technology is incredibly powerful, but the greatest edge that we have is our men and women. And when we lose them, we got real problems.
I agree with you, Admiral, and I also share your concerns, particularly from my perspective, representing New York's 21st District, home of Fort Drum, but we're also home to not only members of the military and servicemen and women, but many federal employees in the district. So I share your concerns, and we're working very hard on this committee to address the negative implications of sequestration and these cuts, which are so devastating to our readiness. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Congresswoman Stefanik. And Congresswoman Stefanik has been a real leader trying to address the issue of defense sequestration. We appreciate her extraordinary service. Additionally, we appreciate your extraordinary service, and then the issues that you're dealing with are so important. We have another round for anyone who would like to participate. And for each of you, in your testimony, the military and civilian personnel needed for the cyber mission forces were discussed, but are there enablers out there in other communities not included in the workforce numbers which you rely on significantly? How are these enablers faring in the budget? What impact would you expect, again, with defense sequestration on these forces? And we can begin with the Admiral and proceed.
So one of my comments, and I in fact just raised this to the Joint Chiefs of Staff last week, was to remember cyber is much more than just the maneuver elements, the teams, if you will, that we're creating. That like every other mission set, cyber counts on a core set of enablers that we often tend to take for granted. So rather than take a lot of time, I'll highlight one area to you. And that, for example, is the power of intelligence, the fact that we rely on a broader intelligence structure to generate knowledge and insight about what is going on in our cyber environment. And we use that insight then to apply this capability we're generating. Without that kind of insight, we have real challenges, as we do in every other domain, about how do you maximize the effectiveness of the resources and the capabilities we've generated in this maneuver force. So I constantly try to remind the broader set of partners that we work with in and outside the department to it's more than just this cyber maneuver force here that we need to be thinking about.
Sir, enabler is really important. Often they're in high demand, low density in the department. There's a lot of structures in place to work the prioritization, but it is truly combined arms. But I don't think we fully understand what we need yet. And here's what I mean. When I took command, we had 2 teams. Today we have 25. By summer, we'll have 41. The demands are growing, and how to best organize the enablers to meet all the demands that the teams are generating as the teams grow, we're working on. We know we need more. To put a finite number on that yet, I think is a little premature, but it's not what it is today.
Chairman, I would say that from the Navy perspective, we are building the teams just like the other service components at places where I've already got commands. So I have a command structure where we're growing teams, and there are enabling functions associated with growing a large number of military people, personnel inside of a command and civilians. And so some of those kinds of enabling functions have not really been thought through in terms of how many career counselors do you need, how many SAPR counselors and victim advocates and those kinds of things. And so certainly when we added the cyber mission force, it was all about that maneuver element, but in some cases we've placed burdens on commands that may not have had sufficient capacity to deal with that growth. And so that's an area that we are definitely looking at where we go from here in terms of both the enabling and, as Admiral Rogers said, the command and control parts of it.
Sir, from the Marine perspective, enabling the whole force really is what cyber is. You have a certain amount of expertise represented in the specialized skills we have focused on here, But the ability of the force to train and exercise, this comes to the resiliency aspect of it, and the idea that down to the network operator level or down to the end user, he's able to operate in a contested, integrated environment, in fact, compromised, and every level of command has integrated the cyber lesson, not just what's specifically designated as a cyber force. So one aspect of that is the training exercises. It gets a whole force and also provides an enabler to the specialists who are the catalysts, but it has to be seen as a comprehensive capability across the force and integrated like any other combined arms. One help for that is a persistent training environment. This helps in a realistically fight a network without an adversary and able to test the force and build resiliency. It also has another effect in terms of acquisitions, which is another area that not so much money, certainly an acquisition program that's tailored to this new capability we're developing. But in the persistent training environment, you get the collective skills across the force, but also you can test the vulnerabilities of things that we're going to acquire and bring into it in overall operational context.
Sir, I would just echo a couple of things and add a few. One is integrated command and control has been key. We've seen that today at the tactical level. If we are able to integrate our command and control elements, that's been a challenge because we've been resourcing the maneuver element. We've not have resourced the command and control, so that's been a bit of a challenge, but we see that as a key enabler tactically. In addition, similar to the Navy, some of the support structure was not put in because of some of the sequestration cuts, if that stays, and so we've got those laid in our current budget. And so if we move back to BCA levels, that may put some stress on the support structure. The couple things I would add is we see tremendous leverage with the Air Reserve component, so our Guard and Reserve partners. They're conducting the mission every day for a couple of reasons. One, we see tremendous talent and unique skill sets that come in the door that complement the training that we give them and the types of operations we're doing. It also offers our active duty members that make a decision to leave the service some options on continuing to serve by wearing a uniform and coming back in the door on a bit limited basis from just a time perspective. But we get to retain that talent and the experience. So that's been a key enabler for us. We've been doing that for years, but we're seeing that magnified in the CMF, the Cyber Mission Force. I would echo also, we really are going through a culture change. We have it's a contested, degraded, and potentially operational limited environment. And so that culture of having to operate through that kind of environment is different. And so moving the whole force, not just the cyber experts, but everyone into that and through those training exercises and exposing them to that is key. And then finally, I would add, it's quickly becoming commander's business. Just like in industry, we're seeing in a C-suite business, CEOs, COOs, et cetera, it's not just the CIO's problem anymore. This is key to have mission success. This has got to be commander's business. So it's not just the commander sitting here representing the cyber talent, if you will, in each of the services, but the operational commanders and getting them involved in the decision process. And what we're seeing in the Air Force is my counterparts in the other combatant numbered Air Forces are very interested and want to understand and want to be part of the solutions. And so we see that as a key enabler.
Well, thank each of you, and we now proceed to Congressman Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thanks to our witnesses. I've got a couple of questions I'm hoping to get to at least a couple of them, get through all of them. So I'm going to go as quickly as I can. But going back to, if I could, retaining and recruiting qualified military and civilian personnel obviously is critical to addressing the threat. So my question is, what challenges do you face in recruitment and retention? And more specifically, how are these challenges being addressed? Special authorities needed, for example, enlistment bonuses, civilian hiring authorities required to address shortfalls in recruitment and retention, and what incentives or methods have been used so far effectively to recruit and retain?
Let me start, and then I'll turn it over to my counterparts, because the services actually generate the capability, if you will, the workforce. When I look across the entire cyber mission force, the positive side to date is that both accessions, input, if you will, across all the services is meeting target, and retention, knock on wood, is actually higher in some ways than we had originally anticipated. I think that's because the thing I try to remind people is we are not going to compete on the basis of money. Where we're going to compete is the idea of ethos, culture, that you're doing something that matters, that you're doing something in the service of the nation, and that we're going to give you the opportunity to do some really interesting and amazing things. I think that's how we're going to compete. And then I turn it over to my service teammates as to the specifics they're running into.
Sorry, Echo Admiral Rogers, we have not experienced problems with recruitment. For example, for our high-end operators, we recruited 75% of the year in the first quarter with no waivers and no bonuses. So there's a tremendous drive on this. The challenge will be retention.
Yeah.
So if I could go down officers, this is why.
How is that going so far on the retention side, just broadly?
Well, we're headed into our first big bow wave because we started this about 3-4 years ago, and they're entering into the first window. I'd say right now it's still unknown, but a few indicators gave us the idea that we have to manage this as a separate branch, because before we did not count cyber. You were a part of another branch and you were selected for promotion or leader development opportunities based on your expertise on that branch, not in cyber. Now you're going to be, now you'll do this with a cyber focus. We've also recognized we need the same thing for our civilian workforce. The civilian workforce, there is no cyber portion of this, so to advance in those, you have to advance in where you were hired into as opposed to a cyber focus. So we think those will really help. We have the right tools with bonuses and all that right now to offer them, and the Army is very aggressive on this at this time.
Okay.
I would say that the Navy is in a similarly situated position as it pertains to recruiting. We have not been having any trouble recruiting to the numbers that we needed for all of our cyber-type missions. And on the retention side, we're doing very well, both officer and enlisted, in retaining the talent that we need. I think we have the tools that everyone else uses in the Navy to incentivize any particular ratings that are low on numbers in particular pay grades and things like that. We use that. But I agree with Admiral Rogers in that in this mission set, it's not about the money. It's about the mission. And so the best thing that we can do to improve retention in this space is give them the training and the tools and put them on mission, because they, what I'm seeing in our young people and our workforce is a very motivated, enthusiastic for the mission. And getting them on mission is the most important thing we can do.
I'm going to hold the General Donahue and General Wilson, if you can perhaps respond in writing, especially if there's something different that you're experiencing. But I wanted to get to the acquisition part. Let me ask, is the current acquisition model adaptive and flexible enough to support cyber technology innovation and rapid utilization of cyberspace capabilities? As you may know, the committee is working on acquisition reform right now, and do you have recommendations on how to ensure the process allows for innovation and rapid acquisition capabilities? My other question, which you probably won't be able to get to, is going to be for Admiral Rogers. Are you reviewing allocation of resources in terms of to meet the combatant commanders' requirements? How do you allocating the resources you need for these cyber mission teams? And so we can probably do that one for the record, but on acquisition.
So let me start on acquisition. The short answer is no. My argument is we have to change the model we're using. The rate of change is such that within the cyber arena, we have got to account for the fact that as we're developing and acquiring capabilities in the department, we have got to build into that process the idea of regular and recurring update and revision. That a set of capabilities that we lock into place and then build to over time. Let's say if you look at what it takes to put a satellite into orbit, if you look at what it takes to build a major warship, for example, I mean, we are talking, 5 to 10 years. And the rate of change in the cyber dynamic in 5 to 10 years is just amazing to me. So we have to build into that program the idea that there will be a recurring refreshment rate required. We don't do that right now in the model at all. That's not the way we do business, but I think we have to get to that.
Well, so we're going through acquisition reform right now. It's now would be a good time
Right.
to help us to get this right. So, okay. I know my time has expired, so I'll.
Thank you, Mr. Langevin. And we proceed now to Congressman Ryan Zinke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess as I watch the fleet numbers go down, I get concerned. I think we're all concerned. But also, when the fleet numbers go down, we're asking our fleet to do more with less. And it's much easier for our adversaries to target individual platforms. I guess the bottom line is if further cuts occur, Do you feel that those cuts could in fact put our ships and our fleet that are in harm's way at further risk of being unable to detect and defend a cyber attack, particularly in the Western Theater?
Congressman, I believe that all of our missions, all of our maritime missions, particularly those that are forward, projecting power around the globe, are critically dependent on our cyber capabilities. And we have spent the last 2 years building programs around closing the gaps in vulnerabilities and increasing our operational capabilities to assure missions around the globe that maritime commanders have to be able to do. And so certainly what the actual CNO said during his budget testimony is if we are held at the BCA levels, he would be hard-pressed to recommend to the Secretary that we reduce any of those investments that we've already identified and made as a commitment to our mission assurance based on the cyberspace capabilities. But I think, as mentioned earlier, another key aspect of that is all of the modernization programs that we have across the board, aircraft, submarines, ships, all of those modernization programs tend to upgrade systems that are dependent on operating systems. And when things like sequestration hits, or we have a late budget, getting to our acquisition system, it ends up throwing a monkey wrench in the modernization plans. Those modernization plans are very critical to closing vulnerabilities. So even beyond what we would call strict cyber investments, our acquisition process and focus on ensuring that our programs are not delivering vulnerable systems across the board, not just networks, but across the board, is contingent on those modernization programs going forward. So yes, it certainly puts at risk not just the capability, but the overall mission, command, and control of Navy capabilities around the globe.
Thank you, Admiral. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congressman Zinke. We now proceed to Congressman Jim Cooper of Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Within the last 2 weeks, I think it was publicized that Lenovo Computer Company shipped laptops already equipped with malware called spear phishing or something. Isn't that kind of amazing that a brand new laptop would already be essentially booby-trapped that way?
Quite frankly, no.
That's not amazing?
Again, because what I generally find over time is, for example, most of the equipments and the capabilities that we will bring on board as a department, we don't automatically assume that it's perfectly secure. We have a series of tests and processes that we go through. I'm not trying to imply it's for nefarious reasons. Many times we'll find that from the time it takes to actually generate and build the capacity to the time that's actually fielded, for example, you'll find vulnerabilities. For example, if you look at Heartbleed, probably the largest vulnerability we had over the course of the summer was based on coding from the 1980s. You find these challenges. This is not unique to the nature of the cyber arena, sir.
Someone estimated, and I hope it's unduly pessimistic, that almost 95% of government IT acquisitions were flawed or deeply flawed in some way. Are you able at NSA to make sure you have clean equipment when you buy it?
NSA is part of a broader team that helps work information assurance for the department. Now, having said that, the services have the overall responsibility for the man, train, and equip functions for their service and broadly for the department, but we do it as part of a broader team.
But for your own NSA operation, you're able to make sure that all your computers are clean?
Yes, we spend a lot of time, as every organization does, we spend a lot of time making sure that we don't have vulnerabilities in the systems that we are counting on to execute our mission.
And that would include system administrators like Mr. Snowden?
Yes, clearly it's not a perfect system. You'll never hear me say that, if that's the point we're trying to make. You'll never hear me say that.
When is, what's good enough for government work? What's clean enough to be safe?
I don't know that there is a particular number that I could give you. It all boils down to what's the level of risk that we are comfortable with. What are the different processes that we can put in place to try to mitigate that? There's no single silver bullet here. as it were. But
Is it a risk for virtually every chip to be made overseas?
There's clearly an aspect of risk to it. I think that's a fair statement.
Is it worth mitigating that risk by having more domestic manufacture?
We, clearly within the department, we try to take a look at that. One of the ways we do it is we try to tier some of our systems, if you will, and the standard, for example, that we'll use within the nuclear infrastructure is different than the infrastructure we'll use for our the systems we use for our morale, welfare, and recreation functions within the department.
But a backdoor can come in from virtually anywhere. The Target hack was mainly the HVAC contractor, right?
So is it possible? Yes, there's no doubt about that.
I don't know how many transistors are in a phone like this, or chips or whatever like that, but it's surely a large number.
It's a complex operating system.
So since everyone carries their own supercomputer with them, is anyone smart enough to figure out the hardware-software interface, even assuming that the hardware is perfect and clean and inviolable? Or
Well, the way I put it is, hey, if it's designed by man, man is a flawed individual. And the idea that you're going to create something perfect in which you guarantee that there's no ability to penetrate is highly unlikely, which is why in the department we do things like defense in depth, multiple looks at the same piece of gear many times. We try to account for the fact that a single solution, whether it be technical, hey, I can create the perfect system, whether it's, hey, I can control my workforce and guarantee I'm not going to have any issues, we try to use multiple layers.
I guess I'm still trying to get at the question of good enough for government work. When are we safe? When have we done enough of that? Do you have to red team everything? Do you have to practice your operation without using computers? How do we?
I think the answer is yes, we try to do all of that. You have heard today already, we talk about the idea about, for example, how are we going to operate HURT within the department? I think the reality of the world around us is, at least on the military dimension, it's not in our best interest to assume we'll always have perfect connectivity, that we'll never have any issues, we'll never have any degradation. Far from it. I think quite the opposite, given the nature of the world that we're dealing with today. We have to think about how we're going to fight through things.
Should the Defense Committee be doing more to help?
Well, I can use all the partners that we can get in this, because no one single entity here is going to have all the answers to this, which is one reason why I think if you look at the resource piece that the Congress holds here, the legal frameworks that we talk about, you clearly have an important role to play in all this. It won't be just us.
Well, I hope you won't be shy about asking.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see my time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. And as we conclude, I want to thank each of you, and it has to be reassuring to the American people to see such dedicated personnel. So thank you very much for your service on behalf of our country. We are adjourned.